Corona pandemic, example of mainstream media terrifying people through propaganda?
The coronavirus pandemic, proclaimed by the World Health Organization, is now affecting the lives of people all over the world. There are confinement restrictions, shops had to be closed, kindergartens like the one behind me are closed. The economy is in free fall, and a global recession is to be expected. Are the implemented measures justifiable? After all, human lives should be prioritized over economic interests, shouldn't they? Or is the corona pandemic a unique example of the mainstream media using propaganda to terrify people, since critical expert opinions on the measures are concealed and silenced worldwide? Form your own opinion on this. The German magazine Blauer Bote has collected the opinions of more than 75 experts on the coronavirus from all over the world. Here, KLA-TV publishes a small selection of these. The complete collection of expert opinions can be found under the link below our broadcast. Professor Klaus Puschel, forensic physician and head of the Hamburg Department of Forensic Medicine, Germany.
This virus influences our lives in a completely excessive way. This is not related to the danger posed by the virus, and the astronomical economic damage now being done is not proportionate to the danger posed by the virus. I'm convinced that corona mortality will not even peak to the annual mortality rate. In Hamburg, not a single person who was not previously ill has died due to the virus. There is no reason for fear of death in connection with the spreading of the disease here in the Hamburg region.
Professor Martin Hadic, specialist in microbiology, virology, and infectious diseases, epidemiology, Austria.
After a long period of reflection, I turn to the remaining people gifted with common sense. And despite possible hostilities, shitstorms or stigmatization, I do not want to be deprived of the right to critically question comments by journalists, so-called experts, as well as decisions of people with political responsibility. The percentage of serious cases and death rates is overestimated by a factor of 10. Anyone who wrongly judges the current procedure to be appropriate would probably have to question this over and over again, with the same consequence every year during the influenza season on the occasion of the annual influenza data.
Professor Eran Ben-David and Professor Jay Bhattacharya, professors of medicine at the Stanford University, USA.
The fear of COVID-19 is based on a high estimated fatality rate. 2 to 4% of people with confirmed COVID-19 have died according to the World Health Organization and other organizations. We believe that this estimate is deeply flawed. If the number of actual infections is much greater than the number of cases, orders of magnitude greater, then the actual case fatality rate is much lower. That's not only plausible, but from what we know so far, it's a likely scenario.
Professor John Oxford from the Queen Mary University, London, Great Britain. World-leading virologist and influenza specialist.
Personally, I would say the best advice is to spend less time watching TV news, which is sensational and not very good. Personally, I view this COVID outbreak as being similar to a bad winter influenza epidemic. In this case, we have had 8,000 deaths last year in the at-risk groups with, that is to say, 65% people with heart disease, etc. I do not feel this current COVID will exceed this number. We are suffering from a media epidemic.
Professor Gerhard Bosbach, Professor Emeritus of Statistics, Mathematics, and Empirical Economic and Social Research, and co-author of the well-known book, Lying with Numbers.
First of all, with the tripling of the tests, there was also a little more than a tripling of those who tested positive. This tripling was presented to the citizens as a tripling of those infected. Far-reaching decisions require secure foundations. This is exactly what has been neglected so far. The repeated equation of the number of positively tested persons with the number of infected persons blurs the view, as does the counting method for corona deaths. The government's guideline concerning when a reduction of the measures is necessary is based on a fictitious number of infected persons, which, however, is not in line with reality.
Professor Jochen Werner, medical director and chairman of the board of the University Medical Center, Essen, Germany.
Coronaviruses are known to us from the past, but the data suggest that this disease is less dangerous than influenza. In the case of influenza, we can all well remember how a serious outbreak occurred in 2017. In the end, there were 27,000 fatalities in Germany, and it seems that some people have forgotten about these 27,000 deaths. This cannot be that we care about nothing but corona, and that somewhere there might be the threat of some other germ outbreaks, for example.
Dr. David Katz, Yale University, USA, founding director of the Yale University Prevention Research Center.
Is our fight against coronavirus worse than the disease? The potential application of a herd immunity approach, the data from South Korea indicate that as much as 99% of active cases in the general population are mild and do not require specific medical treatment. The deaths have been mainly clustered among the elderly, those with significant chronic illnesses such as diabetes and heart disease, and those in both groups. This is not true of infectious scourges such as influenza. The flu hits the elderly and chronically ill people hard too, but it also kills children.
Professor Peter Götzsche, medical researcher and professor at the University of Copenhagen.
Corona, an epidemic of mass panic. The WHO estimates that an influenza season kills about 500,000 people, or about 50 times more than those who have died so far during more than 3 months of the coronavirus epidemic. No such draconian measures were applied during the 2009 influenza pandemic, and they obviously cannot be applied every winter, which is all year round, as it is always winter somewhere. We cannot close down the whole world permanently.
Professor Michael Mayen, professor for communication science at the LMU, Munich, Germany.
A journalism that only parrots public announcements without criticism is coming to an end. Reading the newspaper is quick these days, 2 minutes, like in the GDR. Turn the pages once and you know that the government opinion has not changed and the media logic has not changed either. Actually, I've already said all there is to say about that. I wrote last week about how journalism and politics have rocked each other up on the imperative of attention and thereby created a reality that cannot be discussed openly on the street between 3 people. This is the death of the public sphere which cannot be revived online.
Jonathan Sumption, former judge of the British Supreme Court.
It's usually because people willingly surrender their freedom in return for protection against some external threat. And the threat is usually a real threat, but usually exaggerated. That's what I fear we are seeing now. And anyone who has studied history will recognize here the classic symptoms of collective hysteria. Hysteria is infectious. Whether the cure may be worse than the disease?
Professor Joel Kettner, University of Manitoba, Canada.
First, I want to say that in 30 years of public health medicine, I have never seen anything like this, anything anywhere near like this. I'm not talking about the pandemic, because I've seen 30 of them, one every year. It's called influenza. And other respiratory illness viruses, we don't always know what they are. But I've never seen this reaction, and I'm trying to understand why. Pressure that is being put on public health doctors and public health leaders. And that pressure is coming from various places. The first place it came from was the Director General of the World Health Organization, WHO, when he said, "This is a grave threat and a public enemy number 1. I have never heard a Director General of the WHO use terms like that.